It is officially time for Season 2 of the Florida State Revamped Dynasty. Well, without further ado, I know the main question coming into this season is, who is going to be the starting quarterback for our Seminoles? There are 4 options that all had different levels of play in the spring game that I'm sure brought up a lot of different opinions for everybody. Obviously, the easy choice would be sticking with Tate Rodemaker, the redshirt senior who's got the highest overall. But the appeal of a younger quarterback like Luke Kromenhoek or Brock Glenn, who both performed a little bit better in the spring game, was definitely there. And I went back and forth with the decision. And when you look at the awareness rating, that's where Luke just does not stack up. He's at a 66 as an awareness rating when he's facing off against guys with much better ratings in those departments. But he does have the biggest arm by far, and it's the accuracy that's holding him back. And Brock Glenn played a really nice spring game with 82 throw power and 80 accuracy. So when it came down to it, I feel confident in naming Luke Kromenhoek quarterback 1 for the Florida State Seminoles this season. I'm going to be betting on his skill level, the element he can bring into the ground game, and I think as a quarterback, he's going to be able to deliver us some bigger highs, and he'll probably have some lows that we wouldn't have with the more experienced quarterbacks. But the true freshman Luke Kromenhoek has my trust and will be QB1 for our first game of the season. Then looking across the rest of the roster, it was time to decide, did we have a redshirt candidate? And Damian Martinez is going to get most of the carries in this offense, but I also think Cam Davis, the true freshman, is going to be pretty featured in the offense as well. The only one that I knew probably didn't have a role that I can see right now is Mekhi Danzy. He's a really fast guy and has some skills that are going to be very important in this offense in the future, but has a lower awareness rating, and I just don't know if those skills are going to play right now and I can find a way to get him on the field, and I wouldn't want to waste a year of eligibility, so we will be redshirting Mekhi Danzy. These are our walk-on fullbacks. I don't know how long they will be here, but we are under the roster limit and did not feel like cutting them, so they will be here. Hopefully they don't factor too much into the equation on the offensive end of the football for us, but they're there, so if you see them, they are walk-on fullbacks that there was no point in cutting, so I've left them here. Then at the receiver position, our top 4 guys, the seniors, are all going to play, and play quite a bit. I really had to decide which 2 wide receivers that I wanted to keep active and which 2 I wanted to redshirt, and the decision became pretty evident. In the spring game, one of the main storylines were the struggles of Elijah Moore. He's just not ready to contribute this year, and we don't need him to, so Elijah Moore is a pretty easy redshirt candidate. And then I was deciding between LaWayne McCoy and BJ Gibson, and BJ Gibson had some nice moments in the spring game, but I like LaWayne McCoy's skill set a little bit more. He's a little more different than Camden Fryer, and so we're going to redshirt BJ Gibson for this year. At tight end, we only have 3 tight ends. We cannot afford to redshirt anyone. All 3 of them are going to play, all 3 of them will be featured, all varying skill levels, which I think is very interesting, going from a 97 to a 71, but those 3 are going to be in the offense, so no reason to redshirt anybody. And then when we move to the offensive line, at left tackle, Lucas Simmons is going to be our starting left tackle. And then our true freshman tackles that we're going to have on the roster are not in a position where they can play and really don't need to, so we're going to redshirt Manasseh Atiti, keep our left guards Bennett and Washington. Washington's going to be our swing 6th offensive lineman, so he'll be around, can't be redshirted anyways, but he'll definitely prove useful with his ratings. Maurice Smith and Thomas Schrader, both redshirt seniors, so they can't be redshirted either in their positions, and both solid guys. Jeremiah Byers and Keandre Jones, you're seeing a theme. Redshirt seniors, lots of guys who are not going to be here next year, but that's a problem for future Florida State. And then we are going to redshirt Jonathan Daniels. Might as well get 2 guys in the redshirt system on the offensive line while Renato Brown, one of the better right tackles in the sport, holding down the right tackle spot for Florida State. Then if we move on to the defensive line, I kind of went back and forth of whether a guy like D.D. Holmes needed to be redshirted. We only have 6 total defensive ends, and I could see the pros and cons of like trying to get some more development and trying to do this. But he's already better than Byron Turner, who is a redshirt junior. And this team, I still want to be able to find the biggest upside possible for the team, and I think it might be a possibility that D.D. Holmes proves to be more useful than Byron Turner already in year 1. So I've decided that I'm going to keep D.D. Holmes active, not going to redshirt him. We're already 4 guys under the scholarship limit going into this year, so it's a smaller roster, and I think we need to preserve our spots where possible and try to get the most out of every guy on the roster that could possibly contribute, so D.D. Holmes is going to stay active. And for those same reasons, I'm also going to keep Booker Pickett active. On this side, yeah, he's the 3rd ranked right end and probably could be redshirted, but trying just to get people playing time, and I don't want anybody to transfer at this point since we saw how big of the exodus was last year. So Edmund, Green, and Pickett are all going to hold down the right end spot, and they're all fairly solid and I think can do a little bit of different things. He's a unique guy, only being 200 pounds, and we'll see if that skill set is going to be able to play at the SEC level, and I think giving him and D. Holmes a chance to contribute as true freshmen is nice. Then at defensive tackle, we don't have the depth that I would like, but it's pretty obvious looking at it. We have a top 3 that's really nice in Clark, Jackson, and Farmer. Ayobami Tavase is a redshirt sophomore and is still only a 73, is not the greatest of situations, but he's going to have to play. That's all there is to it. And Artavis Jones, our redshirt, or not a redshirt, but our true freshman, is obviously a possibility to play, but he just doesn't have the strength at this level yet. You see a 79 strength at defensive tackle. It's just not what's going to be able to play and do well for us. So I think it's going to do best for him to redshirt him and give him another year to try and figure things out, build up that strength, and maybe next year come and hop into rotation, because we're sure going to need it with 2 seniors on that defensive tackle lineup right now. Then looking at linebacker, we have Torres Jones, who's the James Madison transfer, who's going to get a lot of snaps from that middle linebacker position. He'll be backed up by Dylan Brown-Turner. And then the question of whether Jaden Parrish needed to be redshirt got brought up. And I just don't think we play enough linebackers, and it's a pretty easy choice for a guy who's a 70 overall that he'll need more time and maybe can contribute down the line. Then at right outside linebacker, all 3 of these guys, we have a range of 81 to 78, all can have different skills and are all decently athletic and productive when they get on the field. So Lundy, Nicholson, and Graham all feel pretty content to me, and I'm fine taking all 3 of those guys active into this season. No reason to redshirt a guy like Nicholson or Graham, who already acquainted themselves quite well. Then at corner, we have Fentrell Cypress, who's going to be our number 1. Kevin Knowles and Grady Vance holding down nice spots. Azaria Thomas going to be about that 4th corner. Then you have a guy like true freshman Charles Lester III, who I want to get on the field in one facet or another, maybe even in the kick or punt return game. So I plan on keeping him active and using that skill set. However, there are 2 guys in this room that are going to be better off as redshirt candidates just because we have the necessary depth. If we go in redshirt 2 guys like Jamari Howard and Ricky Knight III, it makes more sense. We'll still have 6 active corners and probably wouldn't need to dive too far into that depth, and we're going to let those guys have a developmental year as redshirts and see where they're at after progression next year. Then at free safety, it's going to be led by true freshman KJ Bolden, who I cannot wait to see get on the field and see the impact that he's going to have. And then you have 3 second-year guys behind him, and it just doesn't feel right to redshirt any of them because I don't think there's really anything to be gained. I really just need them to get on the field and see who can play well, and I plan on trying to rotate them in as much as possible and trying to see what is there. So Kirkland, Hussey, and Joseph are all fairly safe to me at the free safety spot. No reason to redshirt. It would feel kind of weird for Kirkland and Hussey, who both got to play last year, to not this year. Would just kind of feel odd. So I don't feel right about it, so I'm not going to do it. All 4 of our free safeties will remain active for the year, and there will be no redshirt there. Then, as we go to strong safety, we have Matthew Hill, who's going to be the starter, with Shaheem Brown backing him up, so a good group there. But it does leave a pretty obvious candidate in CJ Hurd, where there's just no spot for him this year, and then Ashland Barker is 1 spot lower in overall, but can't redshirt him anyways. He's already had his redshirt. He can be fine. He'll give probably the same production as CJ Hurd would, so CJ Hurd will get that extra year of development. He will be redshirted for this year, and I think it'll do a load of good for him. Then a kicker. Jake Weinberg is our kicker. Ryan Fitzgerald, I would have cut him, but we were under the roster limit. There is no reason to cut him at this point, so Ryan Fitzgerald will watch on as Jake Weinberg hopefully becomes the greatest kicker in FSU history. No pressure at all, obviously, but I don't like Ryan Fitzgerald, so no loss for me. And then Alex Mastromano will complete his last season of punting for Florida State. He's a great punter, and I feel pretty confident in his abilities, so that's a win-win situation for us. Now let's get to the schedule. Week 1, we are going to be playing UCLA at Camping World Stadium in Orlando. This will be part of a home-and-home-ish kind of series because next year we will play UCLA, hopefully earlier on in the season, where we play them in Las Vegas. And then after that game, after Luke Homerhoff gets off to his fiery start against UCLA, he will be playing at home against Ole Miss, then home to North Carolina, at Alabama, at Clemson. Great stretch right there with a bye week before we come to a road game at Miami, who we'll see how improved they are this year, before hosting Mississippi State, then at Auburn, then a home game against Southern Miss, then at Wake Forest. A former ACC matchup will actually just be a non-con game this time around, And then we have a bye week before we play UCF at home and then Florida at home. And then hopefully a conference championship game appearance this year, but no guarantees. That's what I said last year. So hopefully there's a little better fortunes along the way for us. I think this is a pretty decently tough schedule. I wanted to get off to a hot start and play somebody who was going to challenge us before conference play, kind of like we did last year with Oklahoma State, and UCLA, led by Dante Moore, should be quite a big challenge for us. So we'll definitely see how that fares, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what that equation's going to be. Now let's look around the country at what some other rosters are looking at. So this is what our roster looks like from the top, and this is where you see the top 10 players for each team, and you see the spread is a 97 overall to an 89. And I think when you look at different teams from this perspective, it's a good way of seeing what is your top end talent and how are you going to stack up with some other teams. So I wanted to take a look at how some other teams are faring now. So Alabama, they have a really tight spread of a 93 overall to a 90. And what sticks out to me is 3 wide receivers that are either a 93 or a 91. So they're going to be a little more explosive offensively, and apparently Ty Buckner has a 92 overall, is going to be leading that offense. So that's a choice, but they have a pretty good balance overall. They have another wide receiver at a 90 overall. They have a tight end who's a 90 overall. So I think Alabama should be plenty dangerous this season. Then if you look at Auburn, not quite as much top end talent. They have a 92 to an 84 spread. They have some of their guys that are getting up into that upper echelon to be able to compete at this level, but there's still nothing that scares you at Auburn at this point. They do have a transfer quarterback in Zach Byron, who I believe was at Georgia Tech, so I guess that's a little bit better than Peyton Thorne. When we saw Auburn a couple of times last year, I was just never that impressed, so them getting a transfer quarterback is probably for the best at this point, but Auburn's still on the climb up after firing Hugh Freeze and moving on to hiring Jason Candle, Toledo's coach. Clemson, they had a huge departure in the transfer portal in the offseason. I think it was 19 guys, and they still have some top-end talent. Antonio Williams, a 96 overall, is a very good rating there. Kate Klubnik stayed as the 94 overall quarterback. And then they reloaded at the running back position by getting Daniel Nata, the Washington running back, who was a part of a national runner-up team. He'll be paired with Phil Maffa, trying to replace the production that Will Shipley is leaving. So we'll see what this team does post losing all 19 of those guys. But Sammy Brown is a guy to watch, a true freshman linebacker who will probably wreak havoc for the Tigers. And I think a team that still has a decent amount of top-end talent. They're not too far behind, but you can definitely see that there was a little bit of a black hole left there by the transfer portal. Everybody loves Colorado. They did lose Travis Hunter in the offseason to the transfer portal, but they did get Shedeur Sanders back. He'll have his senior season. He's an 89 overall, so he should be able to put up some really nice numbers, and I think he's going to have a really nice year for Colorado if they're able to keep some weapons around him. You don't see a lot of playmakers in that top 10 for Colorado, just the one wide receiver at an 89 overall, so maybe this offense is going to struggle a little bit more, and it's going to be more of a defensive-oriented team, but I've learned to not count out Colorado, so we'll see how that one goes. Then Florida, they're looking better on the top-end talent. They'll go down to about an 89, so very similar to us. They have a 94 overall running back in Devin Neal. He's from Kansas, I believe, and he'll be their new lead back that they're going to have in the offense, and he's actually going to pair pretty well with Travis Etienne, 2 guys that are higher up on the speed side. And then at quarterback, you didn't see anybody in their top 10 because it's Cam Ward, who's an 86 overall and should provide solid play for Florida and maybe a step up from what Graham Mertz was able to give them last year. And there is the true freshman DJ Lagway lurking, so if anything does happen to Cam Ward, we should expect to see DJ Lagway, and I think we're going to see plenty of Lagway versus Chrome and Hawk battles for years to come in this rivalry, so very excited for that one. Then at Georgia, you see that their positional battles are pretty similar to us, actually. They go down to an 89 overall. Their spread is pretty similar, so they're not running away from the field, but they do look like a pretty dang good roster with Dominic Lovett at a 98 overall. I think that's the best receiver look in the country. And then Will Shipley has a 94 overall from Clemson. That offense is going to be pretty dynamic, and I think you guys already saw the sneak peek of who they have at quarterback and what that position is going to look like this year, and I think it's going to bring a lot of intrigue for the Georgia Bulldogs as they try to rebound from their college football playoff loss. True freshman Dylan Raiola is going to take the reins. Carson Beck, who led the team the entire season, demoted to third string, did not have a really great spring. In all, it was kind of an up and down performance for him, and Dylan Raiola took this by the horns, and Coach Kirby Smart said that Carson Beck just did not perform to the levels that they were used to, and you can only count so much on what happened last year, and there were those up and downs with Beck last year, so it's no surprise that when they were able to find an option for an upgrade, they have taken that opportunity, and Dylan Raiola is going to be the new starting quarterback for the Georgia Bulldogs, and I would imagine he's going to do quite well. He's already an 87 overall, as you can see, and he's probably only got room to grow on the awareness front. Everything after that on the physical skill level is there for Raiola, and Georgia's going to be just as dangerous as they always are, and so nothing has changed, obviously. Now let's take a look at LSU and see what their talent looks like. So they go all the way from a 97 to a 90 overall, led by two defensive stalwarts and Harold Perkins Jr. at linebacker and Mason Smith at defensive tackle. So this team looks about the same as last year, a team that beat us and is better and has gotten better. And they've added some wide receiver talent at 95 overall and a 92 overall in Malik Neighbors. He's progressed nicely. He forwent the NFL draft. Is that how you say it? I guess so. And then Garrett Nussmeier, quarterback for them, is going to be a 90 overall. He's a redshirt junior, so he'll be able to come back and have 2 years of LSU experience if that's what he chooses, or he could ball out and go to the NFL right away. But LSU looks to be as formidable of a contender as any in the SEC, and I do not look forward to our matchups with them if we are going to end up playing them at some point in the SEC championship game. Then Miami, they don't have as much top-end talent. They're more in the high 80s is where a lot of their talent is concentrated, and it's never great that your kicker is your highest-rated player, but they do have Leonard Taylor and Henry Parrish, who've been good players for them, and Tyler Van Dyke is still there as the quarterback, so they will have that consistency. But this isn't a team that scares me still. They're a team that, okay, a lot of their guys are back, and it seems like they've gotten better, and maybe those 389 receivers are going to prove to create a pretty formidable offense for Miami, but I just don't think that I'm that scared of that offense at this point. I think what Florida's doing is a tad more menacing, but, you know, those are probably famous last words, as Miami's going to come back to bite us this year, but that is what it is at this point for them. Then Michigan, another team that has a very strong range, 97 to 90 for their overalls. Junior Colson, the linebacker, is their best player, and he's probably going to wreak a lot of havoc for them at this point. They have a lot of defensive players in their top 10. And on the offensive side, they have one of the better starting quarterbacks in the country, J.J. McCarthy, who is still around, and they also have Donovan Edwards. So I think their offense is going to be able to keep it trucking. They had a couple of early losses that derailed their entire year and what they were playing for, and I think they just need to get off to a better start this year, and that Michigan team could remain a little more relevant than we were used to from last season. Next up, let's look at North Carolina, a team that we're going to play early on in the year, and this is a pretty formidable team. The first thing that sticks out to me is the Georgia transfer quarterback Brock Vandegrift, sporting a 93 overall, and that's one of the better overalls for quarterbacks in the country. So they have went from Drake May to Brock Vandegrift, and he actually has 2 years of eligibility, so if he decides not to go to the NFL, they could have 2 years of that quarterback play. And they've got 3 receivers, 89 plus. So I think this offense for North Carolina is going to be pretty dang scary, and we're going to see it early on in the year, so our defense is going to be tested right away when playing Carolina. Also, an 89 overall tight end, pretty scary for this team, and there's also some defensive talent, so I think North Carolina is in just as good a spot as anybody, and I could easily see them making a repeat appearance in the SEC title game like they did last year when they played Georgia. And then I wanted to go take a look at North Carolina State and see a familiar face. Ike Williams, our former highly touted wide receiver who transferred, is the number 2 wide receiver at NC State. So we are going to see him maybe in the SEC title game if North Carolina State gets there, but maybe that's wishful thinking, but I'd like to see him and see how he does. So we'll have to hop into a few extra NC State games this year and see if we can see some Hakeem Williams highlights. And North Carolina State looks decent. It's just tough in the SEC for them to be able to find any real proving ground there, and we'll see if they've made their improvements at this point in time. Now it's time to look at Notre Dame, who might be one of the most interesting teams in the country because they have 3 wide receivers who are their best players on their team, all 93 plus, and their quarterback is Chandler Morris, who was TCU's quarterback. So this is a quarterback who was a college football playoff quarterback last year, and he's got 3 of these weapons, so it's looking just like the TCU offense. On top of the fact that they have Audric Estime at running back, who is a near 90 overall as well. This Notre Dame offense is going to be something to behold. I think there is a real chance that Notre Dame could be a team that takes a leap this year, and they're going to be in contention in the Big Ten. We're going to take a look at conferences here after we look at the rosters, and you're going to see that they're going to be quite the contender, especially with a guy like Chandler Morris at quarterback. he put up some insane numbers for TCU last year, and that offense that they operated is very scary, and I think everybody should be on notice for them. Now we look at the defending national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. They have a lot of talent. Emeka Egbuka, a wide receiver, decided to come back at a 97 overall. But the bigger story is that Devin Brown beat out Kyle McCord, who went 15-0 last year. Rumors are that Kyle McCord is dealing with an injury and he's kind of slow on the comeback, and Devin Brown has taken this offense by the horns, and he is truly the guy that they think is going to lead them to the next level. It was a really good year for Kyle McCord last year and how he operated the offense, but coaches are playing for their jobs at all times, and Ryan Day said that Devin Brown is the guy that he believes in, and he wants to believe in Devin Brown for as long as they're going to let him. So Devin Brown is going to be the QB1 for Ohio State in the opening week, but we know things can change, and if Devin Brown doesn't perform, I think Kyle McCord will be lurking and be able to help out Ohio State if something does happen. But he's going to have an offense led by Mayan Williams and quite a few weapons at wide receiver. We already mentioned Emeka Egbuka, but then 2 other 89 receivers, and the one to mention is Jeremiah Smith, 89 overall, true freshman, who's 6'3" with 92 speed. He is going to light it up for Ohio State if he's able to get the ball. There's going to be a lot of pressure on Devin Brown to feed all the mouths in this offense, and I think Jeremiah Smith is one that could really burst onto the scene if people aren't careful and could really elevate this Ohio State offense to another level. Then we have Oklahoma. Oklahoma is another team with a pretty good spread of their talent, and they have it in all the right places. They have some wide receivers that are improved talented for this team, good play in the defensive back area, and led by a true sophomore in Jackson Arnold, who's already an 89 overall. And he has an 89 overall running back to boot with him, so I believe this Oklahoma offense is going to be just as potent, and they were a team that was battling for a spot in the Big 12 title game last year, all the way down to one of the final weeks, so if a couple of breaks go their way, I could see Oklahoma having a really nice season as well. Next up, we'll look at Ole Miss, another team we're going to face early on in the year. They're led by Quinshawn Junkins. At halfback, he's a 93 overall, and he's been a menace to SEC defenses for the past 2 years, and I wouldn't expect this year to go any differently, so we'll see what Ole Miss has to offer. They do have a 90 overall quarterback in Walker Howard. Well, he's a true junior, so he could come back for another year, so we'll see and monitor how his play goes and if he's going to make the leap to the NFL or if he's going to take another year and stay at Ole Miss to keep developing those skills, and I think Ole Miss is going to provide a decent enough challenge even though that they don't have the biggest spread in talent on their team. Oregon has a nice spread from 94 to 87. Not a ton of top-end guys, but they are led by Bucky Irving in the running game, and I would expect that to be the case for this Oregon offense and how they're going to want to operate. You see quite a few linemen on this list as well, that if they can use that power run game and use Bucky Irving's strengths to their abilities, then I wouldn't be too surprised with how they operate. Penn State is a team that people are very excited about this year. Nick Singleton, Caden Saunders, and Tyler Warren, all big skill players for this Penn State offense, and big opportunities for Drew Aller to really show his talents. He's got some great skill position guys, and if they aren't able to get it done this year, there's a lot of sentiment around the Penn State fan base that they're just not going to ever be able to get it done. This is Drew Aller's year. He had a pretty nice year last year, but with this kind of development from his skill players, you would expect that Penn State is going to be able to make that leap and at least be able to make the Big Ten title game and compete a little bit better. They made it last year, and Ohio State ended up really putting them in a bind, and they were never really able to stay in the game. So you're hoping for a more competitive Penn State this year when they're playing those bigger teams and seeing what they look like. Next up, we have Tennessee. They have a pretty decent spread, a 92 to an 88 for their top 10 players, and what sticks out to me is their top 3 players are all secondary players. So maybe this is going to be a more defensive-oriented Tennessee team. The other thing you may notice is they brought in a transfer quarterback, Gavin Wimsatt from Rutgers. He is an 89 overall, and he beat out Nico Amayaleva for the starting quarterback job, a guy who was thought to be the next rising star for Tennessee, and he made decent strides, but Tennessee was just not happy with the spring performance and brought in Gavin Wimsatt in the transfer portal to compete with him, and ultimately, Wimsatt has won the job, and for the time being, that's the way the offense is going to go, and Wimsatt has 2 years of eligibility remaining, so even if the year doesn't go amazing and he doesn't go to the NFL, he can still be around for Tennessee and give them another option, and we'll see how it goes. Then at Texas is where all the drama happened. So they have some really nice top-end talent. Banks is one of the top left tackles in all of college football. You have Keontae Mumfield, great wide receiver. Travis Hunter transferred here, and he is now the number 1 corner for Texas. But we all know what the biggest story is. We see it down there at the bottom. The top quarterback for Texas is no longer Quinn Ewers. It is one college football royalty's own Arch Manning, who is a 90 overall. He has leaped over Quinn Ewers. And Coach Steve Sarkisian said, after all of the practices and when it came time to name a starter, he was going to pick the starter that put Texas football in the best chance to win football games this season and beyond. He said that all 4 of his quarterbacks had great camps, but when it came down to making a decision, there was just something about Arch Manning that he believes is going to allow Texas to reach the highest heights. We'll see how that goes with a true sophomore. That also could mean some lows that aren't so pretty, but he has put his faith in Arch Manning, and he is going to be the week 1 starter. And now Quinn Ewers, who forwent the NFL draft and is going to stay for another year, and he probably regrets that now and maybe would have been looking in the transfer portal. He probably thought his job was safe after the way that they finished after only losing 2 games, but that's the beauty of the beast of college football. Next roster up, we're almost to the end. UCLA. They have some pretty okay players, but they are not very deep. They have Andrew Makuba from Clemson as their top player, and he's a transfer. They also have their reliable running back in Carson Steele, and you also see Dante Moore entering his 2nd year of college, and as a true sophomore as an 87 overall is definitely on the right path. This will be an interesting team to play. We're definitely more talented than them. We have guys like our 10th ranked guy is as good as their top ranked guy, so you would think we could out-talent them. But maybe, just maybe, UCLA is going to be able to work some magic. They have some skill and they have some talent, so I don't think we're going to be able to just walk over UCLA pretty easily. Then if we look at their crosstown rivals of USC, they are pretty dang deep. They go from 93 to 90 in their top 10 guys, and they have a lot of defensive talent in this group. Maybe this is going to be a more defensive-oriented USC team, but I think there's still plenty of offensive weapons for Malachi Nelson. The true sophomore has 88 speed and is dynamic with the ball in his hands. His throwing is still developing, but Coach Lincoln Riley says that Malachi Nelson is learning every day, and he has made strides where they feel very comfortable putting the ball in his hands and allowing his decision-making to take over. Raleek Brown is going to be the starting running back for them. 93 speed as a 5'8", 185-pound junior. He's going to be tough to take down, and I think that this USC offense is not going to take any steps back. 4 wide receivers over 86 overall, including Zachariah Branch, who is an 86 overall, and his 98 speed is a game breaker for sure. I think USC is primed for making a big run at the Pac-12 this year. They had a couple of stumbles in Caleb Williams last year in the program, and this is kind of a reset year for USC, that they could make those big strides and maybe get themselves to the college football playoff this year. And then on top of it, they have 3 tight ends that are 81 overall and above. They are loaded. They have huge guys in Deuce Robinson and Walter Matthews, who are 6'6" and 6'7" respectively. This offense is going to be fun to watch, and we already talked about the defensive talent that they possess. I think there are big things in store for the LA school named the Trojans. Now, let's go to Utah. They actually have a really nice look of talent. They have 3 97s overall, which I don't think we've seen a single team have yet. One of those is a kicker, and then you have a left guard and a running back, but if that left guard is opening up lanes for that 97 overall running back, I don't think Micah Bernard is complaining. They have their usual defensive talent, but they have a 93 overall receiver, they have another 90 overall wide receiver, and another running back who's an 89, so I wouldn't even look down on Utah at this point, and their quarterback isn't too bad. He's an 87 overall, Jackson Daly, and then they have the dynamic Nate Johnson with 91 speed behind him, and it was truly a battle throughout all of spring and into the fall that Utah's coach Kyle Whittingham came to a pretty close decision and ultimately wanted to go in Jackson Daly's favor, so I think Utah is going to be just as dangerous as we're used to from seeing from the Utes. Next up, we have our Washington Huskies, who are our national runner-up, and they have kind of reloaded in a different way. They have their best player is Braylon Trice, who's a right end and is going to be able to wreak some havoc from that side. And you see a lot of defensive talent on this board. You see some corners or a right outside linebacker as well. But they also have quite a few other offensive weapons, and maybe this offense isn't going to look so different with the graduation of Michael Penix. At quarterback, they are going to go to Dylan Morris. He is a redshirt senior, and he's got plenty of experience being the backup to Michael Penix. It was a close battle with him and redshirt freshman Austin Mack. Austin Mack is a physical anomaly. He has 88 speed, he is 6'6", 208, and he truly pushed for that job. And you could tell that Kalen DeBoer really wanted to make that call, but he just did not feel comfortable enough with where his development was at. But he is going to be a star for this Washington offense, so watch out for that if Dylan Morris has an injury or is not able to play up to the level that they think. I think Washington will not be afraid to turn it over to the dynamic abilities of Austin Mack. Elsewhere on their roster, they don't have quite the big players at running back, but at wide receiver, you see 5 guys with an 84 overall plus, 3 guys 88 plus, and Xavier Henderson from Florida is going to be their top receiver. Last thing I wanted to go over is how conferences are lined this year. I talked about how things were going to be moving, so if you are on the same line as somebody, you are going to be playing in that division with them. So you have the top line teams and the bottom line teams. They're going to make up the division, and the team that is below you or above you is who your protected rival or who you are going to play for sure this year. So this is what the matchups in the SEC are going to look like. After this graphic, you're going to see what the media thinks of who's going to finish in what spots in the division. But just kind of want to give everybody a look. As you can see, Florida State's going to be playing Clemson this year. Good to keep that rivalry game alive for us in Season 2 of this dynasty. And Florida State is actually picked in this alignment to finish first in the SEC East, with UCF and Alabama being the next 2 teams, which is pretty respectful of UCF, so good on them. And then LSU and Georgia are the top 2 teams in the SEC West, with North Carolina lurking is where the media thinks that's going to pan out for the SEC. Then we're going to go over to the Big 12. This is how their alignment's going to look. Some pretty interesting matchups that I think are going to come out of this season in this alignment. Mainly getting to see Texas and Houston. Always nice to have that Texas rivalry butting up against each other, and then giving Oklahoma and Missouri an opportunity to match up in the Season 2 and being able to keep their rivalry alive is nice. The Big 12 is kind of weird for me, where I don't really have a great feel of where rivalries are, but I'm like, these teams are close, they should get to play to each other, and this is kind of how it's stacked up for Season 2, and I still think it's going to be a pretty interesting year in the Big 12, and I think this is where a lot of question marks are going to arise, especially with Arch Manning leading Texas, and not a lot of people knowing how these teams are going to end up looking. But Texas and Oklahoma are the leading vote getters in one division and being the favorites to come out and represent the Big 12 from this division. It looks like Texas and Oklahoma, but Arkansas sitting in that 3rd spot lurking, and then TCU is favored to make another appearance in the Big 12 title game with Kansas State right behind them. They were the ones who faced each other in the Big 12 title game last year, so it would stand to reason that they would be the top 2 vote getters in that division. And then for the Big 10, Ohio State and Penn State are going to get to have a matchup this year, so that'll definitely be fun. Michigan and Notre Dame are going to get to have a protected game, so we're going to get to see them face off against each other. And the Big Ten feels kind of easy sometimes. Of like, those games make sense. Those are the teams that should play each other. And then there's just some pukage like Indiana and Iowa, which I would never want to watch and hope that that game means nothing and I don't have to watch it for whatever reason. But then when you look at what the media has picked, they have Ohio State and Michigan being the odds-on favorites to come out of that Big Ten division. Shocker, surprise, but, that'll end up being a really important game, and as it should be in a rivalry like that, so we will definitely be paying attention to how Ohio State and Michigan do. And then Penn State and Notre Dame being the top 2 teams in the other division. It seems like a really balanced Big Ten this year, and I think it's going to go down to the wire, and this division also had some wild cards like Wisconsin and Iowa, so a lot to be in store for the Big Ten. And then our final conference, the Pac-12. This is how they're going to shake up. Here's who their protected games are and who they're definitely going to get to play this year. It looks like some pretty simple matchups. I think the biggest one that people are going to be excited for is UCLA and Oregon, getting to see Dante Moore face off against the Ducks. But USC gets Oregon State, who's kind of tough, but should be a winnable game for them. And then Fresno State was not great last year, so Washington, as the national runners-up, get a pretty nice game as their protected game in this season. And then our Colorado Buffaloes get to play Boise State, hopefully on the blue turf. I'd like to watch that color matchup for no reason other than just that, but also I guess I could watch Shedeur Sanders in Colorado. And then the Pac-12 North, Utah is favored to be the team to come out, even besting USC and UCLA. Colorado picked to finish 5th, but we know how that works out, as they were a team that went to the Pac-12 title game last year, so definitely don't count them out. And then Oregon is favored to take down Washington and capture that division title, so they are anticipating an Oregon-Utah final. So that would be an interesting conference championship game as well. I know this was a lot of information for the preseason, and there's quite a bit of stuff that I left out, and I'm going to wait until week 1 and try to integrate it a little bit later on, mainly some recruiting stuff, as recruiting is going to be a lot more interesting this year. But I'll go over all that in week 1 and try to get everybody caught up, but there's just a lot of information to get us ready for season 2, and the time is here. The next video on this channel is week 1 against UCLA, Florida State against UCLA, in Orlando. I don't know if that sounds dramatic at all. It isn't. It's an awful stadium. If you've ever been to Camping World Stadium, you would know it's just the most generic and unflattering place to play football. But hopefully it looks good on the game when we play it. So that's all I got today. I know it's a longer one than usual, but wanted to get out all the information I could for the preseason. It's a pretty exciting time, and I really like how the universe of the Dynasty is played out. And all we have now is to play the games. I hope you have a great day, and I'll join you on the next video.